A couple of days ago I stumbled upon this photo of an orc town that I remember seeing when I was first getting into Warhammer as a kid in the 90s. Maybe it's nostalgia, but there's something about the models and terrain of the 90s that's just brimming with charm and character. And I've always loved the look of the terrain that I didn't have the skills to make when I was a kid. So in this video I'll attempt to make my own version of these buildings. And in the spirit of things, I'll try to use the types of tools and materials I would have had available back then. So no hot wire cutter, airbrush or XPS foam. I'll start by making the basic structures. This is gonna be awesome. Now the basic structures are done. I'm really happy with the proportions of the buildings, though mine are probably quite a bit bigger than the originals, because over the years the models and their bases have gotten bigger, so I had to adjust the size of the buildings to fit a unit of orcs. I did make a couple of mistakes where I glued the wrong things together, but luckily I noticed before the glue set. And I also glued in the floor of this building upside down. Luckily you can fix most mistakes when you're building terrain. Next up I'll be cutting out the windows and the doors, and I'll also bevel the edges because in the original picture all the edges are rounded. I think I'll also have to put in the windowsills before I continue working on the walls. Let's go! So far so good. I decided to also make some trapdoors out of balsa wood because it makes sense that the orcs would want a way to access the roof from the inside of the building. It's also a nice little visual detail, and it's one of those small touches that help sell the idea that this is a building and not just a block of foam. I also used cocktail sticks to add bars to the windows like in the photo of the original buildings. Unfortunately, with all the windows and doors, there's a lot of light coming into the building so you can clearly see inside, so I'll have to do something about that. I can either do the interior, which means twice as much work, or I can black out the windows so you can't see in, or I could just ignore it. I definitely can't ignore it. We'll see. In the meantime, it's time to cover up this horrible looking foam. Alright, the buildings are covered in spackle. Using spackle on such a large area was definitely not the best idea. It looks great, but it took forever to do because I had to go over everything multiple times and I had to wait for it to dry in between. I also gave everything a coat of diluted PVA glue because the spackle felt a little bit weak, so hopefully that'll make it stronger. But despite it taking forever, I'm really happy with how it turned out. The surface is quite smooth, but it has a lot of imperfections, which makes it look handmade and something an orc could have made. Next I'll start making the towers and I'll tackle this steel tower first. I could make it out of styrene and I already have some of these ready-made beams here, but since this is an old school build, I want to use basic materials as much as I can, so I'm gonna make it out of cardboard. I have some thick medium weight chipboard and some of this flimsy cereal box style cardboard that I'll use. I'll start by making the beams that the tower will stand on. The steel tower is almost done and it's looking good. It went pretty smoothly, except that I made the vertical bits of the trim too long, so I had to go in and fix that, but luckily that was easy enough. Small mistakes like that happen all the time, especially to me. I used white glue to assemble the tower because it bonds really quickly with cardboard. Like I did with the buildings, I also covered the tower in diluted white glue because it seeps into the cardboard and makes it a lot stronger so it doesn't fray along the edges. I still need to add rivets, but I'll do that last so I can do it on all the buildings in one go. Next I want to build the water tower and the crane for the mech workshop. I think I have a grabbing club from a battle wagon that could work. For the wooden legs I'm gonna use balsa wood, and I think I'm gonna make the platform out of a plastic lid or whatever I have in my box of plastic junk. I think I also have some plastic jars that could work as a water tank. Let's get back to work. towers came out great. I really love how ramshackle they look. I'm particularly pleased with how this grabbing claw came out. It just looked too short to be sitting on such a tall platform, so extending it with some jewelry chain and garden wire made it 10 times better. Now it's time to make the wooden battlements, which will be a lot of balsa wood. I already have a floor for the tower, but I need to make this platform in the background. I'll have to individually hand carve what looks to be about 100 of these little pointy planks for the parapets. I'm gonna use a lot of super glue because it's really good for gluing balsa wood, but it also melts foam, so hopefully I sealed everything properly. Fingers crossed. Let's go! I've finished the wooden battlements and overall I think they look pretty good. However, I did do a little failed experiment off camera, so now there's this weird texture on the wood that I don't like. Hopefully I got it cleaned up, but I'm a little worried that it might look really bad when I paint it. Time will tell. Now it's time to make the finer details, like glyphs and rivets. For the glyphs, I'm pretty sure I have some in my bits box, so I'm gonna use those to save time. If you wanted to make some from scratch, you could just make them out of cardboard or even just paint them on. Okay, let's do it. The building stage is done. I'm really happy with how everything turned out. Now it's time for the painting stage, where we'll transform all of this to look like a proper orc settlement. buildings are finally done. This was a fun project and a great trip down memory lane. I'm super happy with how they turned out. Now let's take a look at the final result.